Cornhole Champions. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. I'm sitting here with Amie Rivers and Avery Staker. And today, we're going to go over to the Iowa Supreme Court for a story. The Des Moines Register had what I thought was a really interesting look at a couple of cases related to Iowa's new gun rights legislation. For our last story, in 2022, Iowa Republicans passed the so-called strict scrutiny amendment to the Iowa Constitution, requiring courts to strike down any laws limiting gun rights unless the state can show a rule serves a compelling state interest and is narrowly tailored to meet that interest. It's kind of a roadblock, or at least that's how I've written about it in the past, to any conversation about limiting gun access. But despite kind of like people like me's original thoughts about it, and the Iowa Supreme Court being composed of 7 Republican-appointed justices, this piece by the Des Moines Register kind of shows some moments, small but important, where the judges have been divided about kind of the way that strict scrutiny should apply to these instances. Do you guys feel like you have a pretty good understanding of strict scrutiny, or should we talk a little bit about that?
Maybe we should talk a little bit about it in case our listeners don't.
Yeah. We should say that we aren't lawyers and this shouldn't be thought of as legal advice. But, this is based on what I've read about in the Des Moines Register and its reporting and some of these cases that came up. Strict scrutiny is kind of is a legal standard, right? And when in 2022, when the state adopted it to the Iowa Constitution, essentially think about it as like if you want to regulate guns in the state of Iowa, what strict scrutiny does is say that it kind of puts the onus on the state to prove that you are a danger to the society, right? As opposed to me, the would-be gun owner, having to prove that I am not a danger to the society, right? That you, the government, if you're going to regulate us, you have to originate the kind of evidence for why I shouldn't be allowed to carry a gun. And yeah, so it's a pretty high standard in order to regulate that ownership. Does that sort of make sense?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
And so the first case I wanted to go over, there was one person who was involuntarily committed for mental health treatment as a teen. This man is now in his 30s and is appealing to have his gun rights restored. The court agreed that the state has an interest in preventing the mentally unsound from obtaining guns, which is kind of interesting, right? You would, in like kind of what I would have intuited, right, was that this would have been that this person in their 30s, right, far from when they were involuntarily committed, right, that the state would need to kind of prove a greater level of a lack of safety anyway in this case. But we didn't see that, which is kind of interesting. What'd y'all make of that?
That is interesting. We know that, like, statistically, it doesn't matter who is in possession of the gun. The presence of a gun automatically increases the risk of 2 + 2 = 4. The presence of a gun automatically increases the risk of something bad with a gun happening. But like in this specific case, I'd be curious to know what the involuntary commitment was for, I guess, because like somebody being involuntary committed for being a teenager with depression and maybe had like a suicide attempt is completely different from, somebody maybe being involuntary committed because of some other reason that is not coming to my brain right now.
Somebody with a gun.
Like they threatened somebody with something. And like, I just, the interaction of that, the consideration of that I'd be curious about.
In the second case, a man was charged with carrying a gun in violation of a domestic violence protection order or agreement. The courts said he agreed to a protective order and therefore waived his rights to challenge its constitutionality in this case, which is kind of interesting, right? That they essentially were saying that you agreed to this protective order and therefore, right, like, when we say you aren't allowed to carry a gun, right, that you've kind of waived your ability to challenge that, which is interesting, right? Given that it does challenge the person's ability to have a gun. The statistics on like kind of guns in domestic violence situations are pretty bad. Guns are the most common weapon used in domestic violence homicides, with women being killed by her intimate partner with a gun about every 16 hours, according to Brady United. There's a long list that you can look up related to this, but I mean it's the statistics surrounding kind of why we might be interested in restricting gun use in instances of domestic violence are pretty demoralizing. I mean, another case mentioned in this filing, a man was convicted of abusing and attempting to strangle his girlfriend. He challenged his resulting firearm prohibition, and this is actually the only unanimous ruling in the force the Des Moines Register selected here. Where they unanimously said that this person, restricting this man's guns were absolutely permitted under the Second Amendment and Iowa's new language.
Yeah, at least they're still upholding, like you said, the domestic violence abusers not having guns, because that is one of the most dangerous classes of people to be allowed to have weapons.
The kind of last one we'll touch on, there was a man who was charged with carrying a weapon while in possession of drugs or committing other crimes. Court said, quote, "There is no federal or state constitutional right to carrying a firearm while criming," and said the right to bear arms applies only to citizens engaged in lawful behavior.
While criming?
While criming. That's
nice.
Sometimes, I mean, whomst of us hasn't been there? Been out in the street while criming.
Be gay, do crime,
not with
a gun.
Are either y'all gun owners? Out of curiosity.
No.
I like shooting skeet quite a bit.
I did grow up the neighborhood that I grew up in. I grew up around a lot of people that hunt, and so like the people that I knew that had guns had like hunting rifles and stuff.
Did you grow up shooting?
No. My dad was also a city reserve police officer, so he had a gun for a while, but I never knew where it was in the house.
Probably had it locked up.
Yeah, he had it locked up, separated. I had no idea where it was. I
mean, guns were always kind of around in the house. I did a lot of when I say shooting trap, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like shooting skeet, except it's like set up like a mini golf course.
Yeah.
So you go out to like a range, and there's like a button that you press, and it'll shoot a clay pigeon in like certain simulated shots. So it'd be like this one's a squirrel, so it'll like the clay pigeon will hit like a little like ramp and pop up. You're gonna try to take that shot, or this one's supposed to be ducks, or this one's supposed to be geese, or whatever. And like when I was a kid, this was like one of my I always thought skeet was fun. I always thought riflery was boring. I never liked shooting targets. There's just like, for whatever reason, that just made some part of my brain shut down. But I loved shooting trap.
Trap shooting is like a big like high school sport in Iowa. I had a friend that did trap shooting. Her and her brothers all did trap shooting in high school, and it's like a big. My high school had a trap shooting team, and it was like a big deal. It's a big deal for people around here to have their hunting guns.
Yeah. Anytime I think about these. The conversation around gun regulation in the States, right? Like, I find myself often like trying to balance, like, I do enjoy shooting trap, but also like there's like this compelling when we talk about like the prevalence of handguns in our streets, right? And the way that in instances like domestic violence that these things get used, it just is, I don't know, it's remarkable that we're just unwilling to have a conversation that like holds both in head for these things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The other thing I want to note with that last story with the man who was criming.
He'd be out here criming. Yeah.
That man lost his Second Amendment rights because he was not engaged in lawful behavior. And I mean, thinking about who the law scrutinizes often targets non-white individuals, particularly Black individuals. So, I mean, another layer of this is when we're applying this strict scrutiny, we have to be aware of how this strict scrutiny is applied in of course, critical race theory doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, why did Ronald
looking at race? We're just putting more Black people in prison. That's all.
Right.
Why did Ronald Reagan, when he was governor of California, get so angry that the Panthers had their rifles on state grounds?
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Like this is like we're talking like we're the when we talk about like the scrutiny of law, and we can't talk about that without addressing the variances in who the law more often scrutinizes.
That's right.
Obviously,
Right.
those details are not, in this case we did not talk about them, but that specific story is that's what that makes me think of.
Totally.
Because when you are saying the government gets to decide, then the government gets to decide. Then it's no longer sort of equal, protection. Then it's case by case, and those cases are decided by judges who have biases,
Right.
and absolutely.
Then whosoever be appointed shall haveth the power to
Yep.
decide who gets their constitutional rights, and that can be
hmm
kind of a slippery slope.
And guess who appoints the judges?
Beep, beep, beep. Beep, 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 beep,
Pew,
beep,
pew,
beep, 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 beep.
The upshot, despite the strict scrutiny language's reputation of being an insurmountable wall for limiting access to guns, there are a few instances where the court's withholding guns in some specific stances certainly does nothing for on the broader end of things like limiting kind of long arms and handguns. But in these small instances, maybe there's a bit of a silver lining. And that was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you like the show, here are some things you can do to support. 1, go subscribe to the show at our home on youtube.com. Like and subscribe to help us grow this platform and build a space for values-driven media in places like YouTube. Get my newsletter and get these episodes straight to your email every Wednesday morning. That's at cornholechampions.substack.com. 3, to catch up on the work, follow us on Iowa Starting Line's Instagram and TikTok. 4, sign up for Iowa Starting Line's flagship newsletter at iowastartingline.com/newsletter. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. This podcast is produced by me and edited by Rebecca Steinberg. Our music is by Avery Mossman, and our show art is from Desirée Tapia. Cornhole Champions is a proud member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. We'll see you with a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith.
I'm Amie Rivers.
And I'm Avery Staker.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm
Zach's
pretty
like, whoa, I'm good at my job.
Wait,
Wait.
go back.
He already
What?
knows that.
Back. Yeah, no, I got the biggest head in the business. It's got all that glyphosate in the crop yield of the biggest crop I grow is how large my head has gotten.
Zach has ego cancer.
I got a swollen ego, doc, and there's only one medication. It's gonna be terminal otherwise.
I gotta start a podcast.
It drains the ego. It does drain the ego.
I need to be a white man with a microphone.
Truly, hearing me stutter through some of these intros is humbling.